Good evening. It's 6 p.m. and I call this meeting of the Water Commission for Tuesday, January, wrong date, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, to order. All members are present. Please join me and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first citizen comment period. Do we have anyone signed up to speak, or has anyone sent in any comments? Welcome, Jesse.
There we go. Hello, I'm Jesse Valdez, 9035 Center Bar Court. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm glad to see this 7 finally up here. Tried to get that some time ago. Good to see everybody here. I'm here to talk about the wastewater ordinance. After the January meeting, I saw the meeting online and called Chairman Poe about some comments. I want to share those comments with you. The wastewater project was the brainchild of the late Brian Lancey. He was a council member, place 3 at the time. His idea was to provide, if the city would provide a sewer line, then we'll attract businesses that would in turn provide, revenue from sales tax. So the kind of, if you build it, they will come concept. Council supported the idea and they proceeded on to move on with the project. That's when we came out with the city engineering, designed the pressurized system that we have now, grinder pumps at each source that will be eventually put in with a centralized tank. I believe the project was approved by City Council in 2020 using reserves from the general fund. That means that any impact fees collected from tying into the wastewater line go back to the general fund to pay back that, I think it was like $860,000 investment cost at the time. So, as I said, the justification for the wastewater line was to attract business. And generate sales tax revenue. Now, I was part of the Water Commission and Zoning Commission at the time. And planning and zoning, we were in the process of rewriting Ordinance 13. So to help attract businesses, we incorporated into the Ordinance 13 to allow higher impervious cover. If we went from 35% for residential up to up to 75% at some of the working districts. The trade-off was to qualify for the higher impervious cover, you have to tie into the wastewater line. Okay, and that's reference Ordinance 13-10, 2024. It's on page 51, table 2.05.07, zoning dimensional regulations table. So again, all existing facilities that are on septic right now were grandfathered. That was the idea, was to grandfather them unless they make a change to their septic system, even if they're close to the water line, even if they have a problem with it or they're expanding something. That's the only way they're required to tie in. But again, the idea was to increase impervious cover for businesses to attract them. So I asked the commission to consider this ordinance 13 into the rewrite or to this new wastewater line to be sure that we all get it all incorporated together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Jesse. Item 4, business items. Item 1, approval of the minutes for the January 20th Water Commission regular meeting. Does anyone have any corrections to the minutes as provided in your packet? Okay. May I have a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, please indicate.
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2, Utility Department monthly activity report. Stephen, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the month of February, we pumped 2.5 acre feet out of the Edwards with 19.54 acre feet year-to-date, leaving 614 acre-feet. Edwards is in Stage 4 restrictions. We are in Stage 2 currently. We pumped 53.51 acre-feet out of the Trinity with a year-to-date total of 97.26. All samples, distribution samples, and bacterial samples came back good, passed. We had a water loss of 4.3%. Completed 265 work orders, 42 locates. AMI information, total portal customers, 951, up 3 from January. Meter daily readability percentages was 99.29 for 1,678 assigned meters. No main breaks found. 2 new leak adjustments, request 2, waiting on 2. Waiting for customers 2, 1 approved, and 0 denied. That's all I have to report for the month of February.
Thank you, Stephen. Questions from the commission?
What's the difference between the meters read, the 1705 and the 1676 or 1678? Why? Your daily meter readable percentage? You know, what happened to those 23 feet? What's the difference between here?
Oh, 1705? Some of the meters that we have are, I believe are, let's see, Michelle, what was the difference between the 1705 and the 1668?
So the difference is, there are some meters that are assigned to the city, but they're used for their reading only, like the well sites have meters, so it picks up anything that is in our inventory as an active meter, and if it's assigned to a customer, then that's what the readability is showing, anything that's assigned to a customer. But if it's not assigned, then it's picking up in the difference in that.
Stephen, I had one more question about when Ranger goes and pulls out of hydrants, is that meter, how do they read that meter?
We have a hydrant meter connected.
Yeah, do they turn it in or how does that get read?
Whenever they apply for a meter, it's basically the first reading that's on there is read, and then when they decide they want to discontinue use, we use the final read also, but it also gets read manually every month
Oh, okay.
on the fire hydrant meters. We don't have the AMI on the actual fire hydrant meters.
Okay, thanks.
And then, Stephen, why did we pump so little from the Edwards? Is that getting ready for Stage 4, or?
Well, at the beginning of the years, it's still the cooler months, and we want to kind of basically conserve a little bit of that water because we don't know what to expect for the rest of the year. I mean, beginning of the year, we entered into Stage 4 with Edwards. Their restrictions, Stage 4, and I mean, technically, right now we're at 625. Let's see what's got. Where did I write that down at? We're at 628 feet right now with the Edwards, and at 625 they declare Stage 5 restrictions. So right now would be a better time to conserve and basically play it safe until we know what's going on with the rest of the year.
Thank you.
Stephen, the last couple of months, the unaccountable unsold percentage has been trending a little bit higher. Is there any explanation there?
It might be just something we cannot find yet. It hasn't rose up to the surface if there's a leak out there that we haven't found yet.
Okay. In February, we had some very cold weather. Did we have a spike in notifications of leakage or anything that, I mean, that's, you know, that's captured in the meter, but I was interested in looking. There wasn't a lot of applications, it looks like, for water loss, or maybe they haven't filtered in yet, which is encouraging, because I guess it means people are getting their notifications, responding quickly. I'm trying to read something good into that, because I'm sure there must have been some burst pipes.
I mean, we're catching we're monitoring the AMI system, and if we see something, we'll let them know and notify them pretty quick whenever we see it. Even when we have time, we even can see small leaks, and we'll get to those and let them know there's something, a small leak going on in their property also. But for the most part, we'll focus on the big ones right off the bat, and then we'll kind of filter down to the smaller leaks in the system.
That's great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Item 3, items applicable to the Water Commission that were discussed at city council meetings. From the February 4th city council meeting, city council approved the water system capital approval plan. The discussions went very well. I think the council was very receptive. Comments were made that the next step now is to put this into play and begin incorporating it into future budgets. Council also approved an authorization for the city manager to make grant applications for the Texas Water Development Board for funding of water system projects. And there is some activity that has been going on, seminars, I think, educating cities. I know Commissioner Strickland, this is some questions you've asked in that area. So that authorization was given to Ryan for those applications. From the March 4th meeting, there remains some right-of-way easement issues affecting the progress on the Garden Ridge Saws interconnect line. I don't have any more details on that, but I think they're just sort of chewing through that with Tri-Hydro and hoping to get that cleared up. Any questions? Okay, item 4, wastewater ordinance, which is our primary activity here this evening. Just a little bit of a lead into this. This is our 3rd review of the draft. I'll request that Jason Breland, who's with us tonight from Tri-Hydro, go through this to give us kind of a review of the change, highlight any key areas or areas needing further work. And then at that point, we'll open it up for commission comments. Jason, thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. So just going through the changes on it, I think they're, for the most part, a lot of them were fairly, minor, just cleaning up some of the document and, just walking through it. The exemption section, that's in place, and it was changed to reflect what I understand was, the desire of the city. Moving on, I think there are some minor edits in there. The financial program application section, that was removed. Now, if that's something that the city would want to keep in, we can definitely add that back in, but that's not something I typically see, but if it's something the city desires, it can always be added back in. And that was section 3.07 if you have the old version. And then section 5, the sewer service connection, just clarifying it's a sewer service connection, and just a few updates on the fee structure and where that's located. And then the specifications section, it was kept as referring to the New Braunfels design standards. And then finally, section 5, environment. Section 5 was 5.03 and 5.04 were removed. It's kind of redundant, and basically we also wanted to make sure it's the city's desire to preserve the ability to keep on septic systems. So that section was removed. And then 5.06 and 7, those were deleted. 5.07 mainly was because it was the city saying that no septic tank permits will be issued where it's possible for the landowner to connect, but the city does not issue those permits. It's, issued by the county. And that is basically a quick summary of the changes. Are there any specific questions or comments, or?
Thanks, Jason. At this point, we'll go to comments and questions. I guess as much as possible, we'll start at the beginning
Okay.
and plow through it. If we need to refer back, I think that way it kind of keeps all of us on the same page as far as our comments. If we need to refer back, we can do that. I think your comment specifically about the financing side was, we don't do that for any other services within the city that I'm aware of. So it was almost like it was adding something that maybe
Sure.
wasn't needed, but okay. Okay, at this point, comments?
Hey, Jason, on the tapping requirements for those, when they bring in a permit, are we going to review it from the engineering perspective along with the operations and maintenance?
Are you saying every time they're requesting to tap on?
Yeah.
That's, at the discretion of the city, but, if they want us to review, we definitely can. Do you want that in your ordinance, that it's going to be reviewed by the engineer? Is that?
Well, it could be in I'd see in the Public Works Specification Manual. I just didn't know if there was an engineer review in the Public Works Specification Manual for that tap into that main, Like, who's gonna do that from the drawing and specifications?
Sure. We definitely, if that's something that you want the engineer to do, I haven't reviewed the other documents, so I'm not quite sure what that says.
What page are you on there? I wanna read.
Page 3, 2.04.
I had a similar question in that it implies that there's a public works specification manual. Does something like that exist now, or is that something that is going to fall out of the creation of this ordinance?
So, and thank you, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is not passed yet, so that's still in draft form. So that's under the assumption that that's going to be passed, I believe.
Okay. So to address the question then, unless it's an unusual hookup or something that a restaurant wants to tie in, the specs manual would contain the information that it would allow valid review of that permit by the city versus necessarily booting it up to the engineering company.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think my main concern is, like, when someone comes to apply for a permit, are they gonna show how they're gonna connect and where they're gonna connect so that we can put it into the maps and Ryan can track it and Stephen knows where that connection is? And, I mean, what are we requiring when they apply for a permit? And I think that'll be addressed, right, in the Public Works Specification Manual?
Yes, sir, that should be
It should be
addressed
outlined
in
there. And again, we would, in that case, have our engineers review that from a civil standpoint.
Okay.
But yeah, it should be outlined as far as specs, how to exactly, in order to get the permit. I mean, we have third-party plan review that does, everything related to building and permits right now, so they may look at that aspect as well. But more than likely, probably our engineer, on-demand engineers.
Going back a page 2, talks about exemptions, but that I guess it would be item D, property owner or development, as long as they're not subdividing or otherwise developing the establishment, house, building, or property. Something I became aware of the other day is that in addition to the main dwelling in Garden Ridge, there are people that are putting in, in-law quarters, second houses that are really fully functioning. In fact, I saw on rental.com, one of these is being rented as a living quarters. And I assume that's okay with the city, but I'm sort of thinking out loud, how does that change the use of that property, or is that second home, so to speak, on the back of this lot tied into the existing septic. I mean, the city, I think, has had to deal with that because there's at least one of these in the city. I'm sure there's more than that. Sort of what's the, I'm looking to you, Stephen, maybe what's the background on that? Are they just, that second structure just tied in, and does that conflict with this?
Well, I know people that have a second structural ask for a separate meter, but they have to have that same 1 meter per that setup because they're considered one unit. Septic-wise, I'm not really sure. That'd probably be more of a county inspector question on that
Okay.
for dual structure septic. But I haven't heard anything about what it would be for
Okay.
septic or two buildings connected to the same septic. You'd think it would just kind of go as, just tie into the main route before it'd go into the aerobic system. But no, I haven't had to deal with any situations where that came up.
And Commissioner, as it's written now, that would be C exemption. Under C is, there's not a change in the use of the property or enlargement of that. And I would, if they were adding on another building, I would see that as an enlargement
Yeah.
to the use of the septic system, which may preclude them from that exemption.
Okay. Garden Ridge is unique in that the size of our lots allow this to happen, and many times these structures exist and you don't know from the street that they're there. I'm kind of tossing this out to the commission as to where we think something like this should stand. I mean, apparently it's existed successfully for a while. I mean, there's homes that are using, I assume it's the same septic or a second one put in on the property. I don't really have any knowledge other than I just kind of started putting some pieces together.
I'm not gonna find it quickly, because I thought there were restrictions on the use of the second structure.
So to my knowledge, as far as like account-wise, if there is a second dwelling, there's not a way to separate that as a second, like, rental property. It would just be considered part of the same household, because we don't separate those. It would be just like an additional dwelling, or like a casita, or a mother-in-law suite, or something that might be just an additional dwelling. But there's no way to separate it account-wise for, like 2 separate meters, and that's what Stephen was explaining. It would be 1
Yeah.
meter. As far as septic, they would have to go through county to determine if they required a second septic system. But that wouldn't be something we would know or have knowledge of unless they did some kind of permitting through the county.
Yeah, but usually the county does, unless there is a permit filed, because it's been a long time since I dealt with septics, but I believe that the sizing of the septic is based on number of bathrooms and issues like that. So if you add a completely additional house to your lot, I don't see how you could tie in, again, going back to, what's the word we use, enlargement? I think, but, and I've walked by several of those and watched them being constructed. I've never seen a hole being dug to put a septic in, or an additional septic, so I don't know how you would manage that flow in your existing system. It's a good point.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of snap back to the words here because it appears that would be an enlargement, which means that somebody in the middle of Garden Ridge would have to tie into a sewer line. Well, that isn't gonna happen. I mean,
If they're within 300 feet, yes, sir.
90% of the town is not. I'm talking about
Yep.
existing residences where these types of things are going on.
And the exemption applies to those that are within 300 feet of the public sewer, as in 2.01.
Right, right.
Yep.
I'm just, like I said, this just it came to light. Another question, I mean, when somebody wants to build, certainly a structure like that requires a permit from the city, and an inspector approves this, what triggers Comal County's involvement in a septic system? I realize that isn't directly germane to what we're doing here, but it is related in that it's affected.
Well, I know the county wants to keep records of all the septic. I see, say if we had sort of an issue with somebody's septic was overflowing, it would get directed to the county for them, their investigators to go check out. For the most part, it's, whenever a new, house gets put in, they have to put a permit with the county, and the county basically monitors the, maintenance contracts and everything else that goes along with the, septic system. Say if somebody canceled their, contract with their septic company, the company would send in information to the county saying, hey, I'm no longer doing this inspections on this, and county will send them a letter saying, hey, you need to get somebody back on the schedule so we can get regular updates of this, of your system. I mean, we had that one time. I canceled a company and then got a letter from the county saying, hey, you need to keep up with this, and you have so many days to report that you found a new person, or we'll investigate further, or penalties or whatever. But yeah, they pretty much take care of that.
Let's move on to some other sections, but that one is a bit of an open issue in my mind, how that,
Well, Mr. Chairman, so
yeah.
I agree we need to move on from this, because for the purposes of this ordinance, it's still an increase in the use of the property or an expansion and enlargement, so I think that part's covered. But my question was, I thought the last time we reviewed this, we had a comment on 2.01 that we wanted to exclude residences altogether. So I mean, again, the history of the thing was this was for business use. The reason the lines are located where they are is that was business development. Do we really want to get into the residential side of this?
I think it was to be clear about what is existing. Now, if somebody puts in a new residence development that should happen to be within distance of a sewer line, I think this would require a sewer connection rather than a septic connection, rather than a septic system.
I agree, that's what this says, but I'm not sure the high-pressure system and the grinders is all that compatible with the type of residential use that we're talking about, and I'm just, my comment is I thought the previous comment was we didn't want to deal with that. If that's not the case, then, you know, that's fine, but
The thing is where there's some zoning in the city, residents will be different than 3/4 acre lots that we think of. I mean, it could be medium, higher density, I mean, which is within the zoning ordinance. That is a residence, but I don't know that those facilities incorporate grinding pumps and things like that. I don't know. Jason, I don't know if you can weighed in on that. I mean, I think I understand what you're saying, but I maybe came away with a little different thought on that.
I think it's also looking at other scenarios as well, and if it needs to be directed more just towards the commercial, it can be, but I think the intent is if there is a new residence, something within 300 feet, then it would need to connect, which it could. There are houses, residential houses, that do have grinder pumps and things like that.
I mean, in the undeveloped areas of Garden Ridge, there are some that could become higher density housing. I think the zoning allows for that. And if a sewer line would be put through that area as part of its development, I don't know that it's.
I don't know either. I mean, it's been so long since we looked at this, but I thought the zoning portion was all commercial or industrial, and that there was no higher density residential in that area, but I don't know.
Ryan, can you comment on that? I mean, I don't have ordinance 13 in front of me, but I've sat through many reviews of it, you know, just at city council meetings, but I was thinking that, I mean, there still are developable residential areas as well as areas zoned for higher density housing. I mean, and other purposes that might happen in the future. Is that correct?
There's very small sections.
Okay.
I mean, we had a meeting not too long ago with someone who's looking that possibly, based on size, could develop out a few homes. But that was sort of the last of any part of the section that could be developed from a residential standpoint in Garden Ridge. Hank and I actually met with them maybe about 2 months ago. But it seemed like that was the last one, because that may be able to provide 10, 12 homes. But that seemed to be the last area for residential build-out from that standpoint. That's answering your question.
Yeah, thank you. I think I remember that. That came up in a city council meeting. I mean, it seems to me if that would occur, they're going to be in an area that's going to have a sewer system, and they would be, it would make sense, let me put it that way, that they would be connected.
Yeah, they got copies of everything they needed from a development standpoint from us, but we
Okay.
haven't heard back anything from
Yeah.
them, so.
No, I'm really talking more theoretically rather than trying to pry out what's going on there.
And that's fine if that's the answer. I was just recalling that had been a discussion, and I thought we decided the other way. But
Yeah.
if that's the case, then we leave it in there, and we move ahead with it.
Yeah. Expressing myself, I would like that. I would probably prefer that. If there's anything unclear about existing residences, I think that was covered in some of your changes. Is that correct, Jason?
Yes, sir. And the exemptions, like I said, are in that section 2.01, under the exemption number 1, so.
Okay.
And that basically alludes to, existing systems that are in full compliance, that were permitted, not causing nuisances, are exempt from it.
Okay. I have a question on 2.05 on page 3 about street repair. It's maybe more of a wording thing. First it says all paved streets will be repaired by the owner of the property, example, the customer. Customer is responsible for paying for all material used by the city in repairing the street. That seems to be, which is it? Does the city repair the streets after they're cut up for a sewer line? And then whoever causes that has to pay for it? Or does whoever cuts the street up have to pay for it? Either that or maybe I'm not reading this right.
Well, when you start talking about utility cuts, most cities have a right-of-way ordinance that you basically have to put the street back in its current state or where you left it in, right? So when utility companies come in and they do a utility cut, there's typically the right-of-way outlines the PCI score related to the street.
Right.
Thus, if it's in good shape, you have to do curb to curb, and then you have to go out a certain feet. But right now, we don't have a right-of-way ordinance. It's actually, I was just talking to Stephen about that right now.
Okay.
Before this meeting, so it's now on the radar to make sure we get that done as well.
I guess I'm wondering whether 2.05 just says all paved streets should be repaired by the owner of the property. I mean, the owner of the property is the person that's putting the sewer system in. And then, and strike the sentence that they pay for all the material. Well, they do if they're doing it themselves, but it implies that the city repairs the street. To me, it's,
Yeah.
It says
and
two
that could
things.
just be a little clarification there. But,
okay.
but again, we don't have that enforcement mechanism to go back and, right now, without having that right-of-way ordinance in place to say, you need to put it back exactly where you left it when you came to do the work.
In anticipation of that, would it be appropriate that it would say the repairs have to be done by the person that's making the changes, not the city? Is that,
Yeah, I mean, we could wordsmith it, let's figure that out, but I understand what you're saying, Chairman.
okay?
If you're referring to someone who's like contracted a company to come in and do it, from that standpoint?
Well, I don't know how it gets done, but all I'm saying is this paragraph starts out by saying that whoever's doing the work has to fix it, and then it goes on and says, you gotta pay for the material for the city to fix it.
Yeah.
It's not clear who it's a little bit of semantics. I mean, it's clearly understood what's intended here.
Yeah, it's a little ambiguous, and we'll try to clean that up.
Okay. Yeah, again, and look at the appropriate wording that might tie into how you want to, how the city management would like to have this say. I mean, I don't think we've got a dog in this fight. It's more just making sure it's clear.
Yeah, you just, again, when some cities deal with
Okay.
utility companies that they don't have control over, but they provide those services, you have to protect your infrastructure.
Okay. Okay. I'll make a note of that one, that the city would, will take a cut at that. A little further down at the bottom of the page.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
I've got a small comment at the end of 2.06, talking about users will be billed according to their contribution of sewage to the system. How is that going to be measured?
To my knowledge, I think City of San Antonio looks at your water usage December, January, in that timeframe, and then your,
Typically, yeah.
right,
Okay,
and then
I
your
mean, is
surcharge,
that
yeah.
generally understood?
I had the same question.
Is that generally understood, or does that need to be clarified, or would that be in the schedule of fees that show up elsewhere?
That's something we can definitely discuss. I mean, you are right. Typically, it's the winter usage. It'll be whatever months, November, December, January, or, December, January, February. And I think that's, on a typical gravity collection system. Now, this is being pumped. I don't know if there's a way to capture that, to meter that, but, typically it would be based on the water usage. And if we can definitely include that if that's what you want in here, which I think would be appropriate.
Okay.
We do need to be careful we do that, because at least currently within the city, there's usually one meter for both the actual, beneficial use of the water as well as landscape use. So if they're gonna do that, then they would need to have we would have to separate that out, or have some sort of formula to do it, because the landscaping water is not gonna contribute to the sewage.
Yes, sir, and typically it's a percentage of that use. I mean, a good portion of your water usage in the wintertime is excluding that landscaping, so it shouldn't really be too much of a factor in that.
Be another way to encourage people to conserve water for their landscape.
Does this wording give the city enough wiggle room? I mean, eventually, there'll have to be fees crafted to accommodate sewage fees. And like we've just said, generally it's a ratio to water usage.
That would be eventually have to be incorporated.
Okay. Because I don't know that we want to get into the fee structure of that kind of thing, other than saying it needs to be equitable and proportional, which is what it says here. Does that seem to be acceptable at this point? Okay, fair comment. Okay. So for now, I guess the consensus is we'll leave this wording as it stands. Okay.
Are we going by numbers?
Just roughly speaking, I mean, or
I'm just
we're kind of on
wondering-
page 3 here, yeah.
Well, page 3, 207,
Yeah.
grinder pump requirements, that's no requirement. Just says you gotta buy one and stick it in. I'd like to look at that, I have that looked at a little closer. And then jumping down to my favorite topic, definitions, I think we could probably use a few more.
Commissioner, can you repeat your comment? I was having a hard
Oh,
time hearing that.
definitions, I think we need a few more,
Okay.
and some of these are a little open. But grinder pumps, there's no requirement. It says grinder pump requirements, but this just says everybody has to buy one. It doesn't talk about sizing or the particle size that comes out of the grinder or anything.
The specifics on the grinder pumps
needs to
themselves.
be, well, yeah, either it says that you have to size it according to some formula, or have an engineer size it or somebody, or, I don't know, what's in here now just says, go buy one.
Yes, sir, and-
We talked prior to the meeting about some definitions. We'll come into a few others. If that's appropriate, fine. The city of New Braunfels, which is going to be sort of the master plan, so to speak, for design, does that, for example, does that design spec get into the guts and feathers of grinder pumps?
Yes, sir.
So in a way, it's layered in there, is that right?
The design of the pump
Okay.
should be, yeah.
Okay. Are grinder pumps required for residential sewer connections?
If it's going to be connected to a force main like this, yes, sir.
Oh, it is, okay.
But, you know, it depends on how the system is designed. This particular one, you would want a grinder pump. It was designed to have grinder pumps, you know, pumping into it. So whether it's residential or commercial, it would need to be a grinder pump.
I see. Okay.
I think this might go with the, 2.07 and 4.04, the discharge of garbage into the sewer system, where it talks about the grinder. It's in two different places here.
Okay. So this states a requirement, and if you need to meet that, okay, refers to the grinder pump. Okay.
For clarity, now on your definitions, just put your requirements in the grinder pump, instead of having to try to sort through 4 or 5 different locations and hope you get the right ones.
Will that be in the spec manual, the grinder pump specs, or the requirements of the grinder pump? Will that be in the spec manual?
It should be in the design manual.
Okay.
But, and that's one thing, I'm writing a note to, verify all that, and also make sure it doesn't conflict with this 4.04.
Okay. Thank you, good comment. At the bottom of page 3, it refers to Garden City, or Garden Ridge utility rules and regulations for sewer services. Is that just another words for the Public Works Specification Manual? I don't want to introduce yet another document or requirement. Is this something different?
I think, my understanding that would be, basically your ordinance and everything else. So I'm not quite sure what that would be referring to. I agree that needs to be cleaned up.
Because it's referred to in relation to the idea of the point of service as defined by the City of Garden Ridge rules and regulations. So, I mean, I'd almost like not to keep encouraging or requiring more documents that the city has to prepare if all we're talking about is where the point of service is defined. I mean, I don't know if that can be put up in the Public Works Spec Manual. It's just something that needs to be looked at, because otherwise, somebody's gonna wanna do this, and where does this exist? And it doesn't exist, I don't believe.
Correct, and then I think that was, that was probably
Okay.
intended to be a vague term, but it
Okay.
does sound like a specific regulation, which it isn't. So I believe, I agree that does need to be reworded.
Page 5 has a similar thing.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I've got a similar comment from the private lateral definition at the bottom of page 3. It makes reference to a sanitary sewer system. And in section 4, several of those, it talks about a public sewer system. And in section 201, it talks about a on-site wastewater facility, parentheses, septic system. And then private lateral is used a lot in section 3. Are those all talking about the same thing, or is a private lateral a portion of a public sewer system or a sanitary sewer system? Or, I was a little confused. Are all these things talking about the same thing or different parts of a larger item?
Yes, sir, I think you're correct. I think they're all talking about the same thing, and it probably should be clarified. Yeah, and the terminology used the same, a lateral versus a service connection. I mean, they're the same thing, but
Yeah.
if we're referring to both, they do need to be
I think to the
consolidated.
extent we can conform the terminology,
Yes, sir, yep.
it'll help with clarity.
Okay. You okay with that, Jason?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, that's definitely, I agree. We want to make sure it's clear on exactly what we're referring to.
I guess I had a similar thing on, in page 5, 3.05C. It refers to, it repairs on private laterals, as prescribed by the City of Garden Ridge standards and plumbing code in effect at the time. Again, that sounds like another document. So if that is other words for the, I'm looking for it, the Public Works Specification Manual, that's fine.
Yes, sir,
Or
what
else
section
it
was
ref-
that?
I'm sorry?
What section was that, sir?
Page 5, 3.05, parent C.
Make sure I get
It's fine, it says it's got to be done as prescribed, but it refers to a document that's a little, the wording of it is a little bit different. It's standards and plumbing code in effect at the time. So either leave it out because it's implied that the New Braunfels documents govern all of that, or refer it back to this document that's going to be created called the Public Works Specification. I mean, if it can, wherever it needs to exist, I mean, it needs to be done in accordance to something. I just don't want to have another document.
Yes, sir, and
Okay.
I agree, the standards part probably is a little bit confusing. The plumbing code, that was just recently adopted, correct?
Okay.
Yeah, so that would refer to the updated building codes that we just did last month.
Okay, that you just passed. Okay. And so somebody reading this would be guided to that development ordinance
Yeah,
for plumbing codes.
council changed the building code from 2009 to 2021
Right.
last month, so.
Yeah, I remember that. Okay, so maybe clean up that wording just to refer to plumbing code, I guess. And I believe the National Plumbing Code is referred to in this ordinance that was voted this month. I remember. Okay. You covered everything, I think, as I remember. Okay. Bottom of page 6, the service and disposal, we talked about this a little before the meeting, Jason, industrial discharge, that to define industrial, because that, as you've indicated, generally means industrial, healthcare, restaurant services. Again, like Dr. Carmichael commented, maybe to bolster the definition section so that it's clear that if you're putting in a restaurant, you got to comply with this section because it's industrial.
Yes, sir.
Is that
Yep.
appropriate? Okay.
Could we digress for just a moment, because I had a kind of a broad question of what kind of industry are we trying to attract? I mean, can we narrow that down? Because I don't think we want a large manufacturing facility or plating operation, or, you know, what, is there a way to narrow, I don't know if light industry has a definition within the business world, or if there's some way we can say we don't want to become the manufacturing center of this part of Texas. I mean, we're small. You know, New Braunfels has a lot of requirements because they have a lot of territory and they attract a lot of industry. I mean, major industry. I don't think we are trying to attract major industry to Garden Ridge. I think we want to keep it to restaurants and the type of things on the roadside that stop along that you stop at along the way, and not a large manufacturing or plating operation or construction, building, I don't know.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but ordinance 13 and other documents, the master use plan, spell out what's allowed within the city. I mean, there are industrial uses, in fact, the quarry qualifies, but it's very restrictive, but there is quite a bit of verbiage. I mean, there's pages and pages about what's allowed and not allowed in that ordinance. So I opened it up for comment, but I think the use of these words doesn't alter what's actually in the master use plan and in Ordinance 13. It very clearly delineates in there what's allowed, where it's allowed, under what conditions, more than I remember. I think, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, zoning's gonna
Right.
drive that. And it's not like we have a lot of property available for that type of industry. So, yeah, I mean, again, if it's kind of wordsmithing this or changing this, we could do that. But it's probably reflective, again, because we're mirroring another city with the light industry. Thus, I think, probably mostly shirts from that standpoint. Correct, Jason?
Yes, sir, and, you know, and if we need to use another term, we could always change it from industrial to, you know, non-residential, or, you know, something like that, but.
And maybe that's appropriate, because when you first read it, I think everybody has an idea of what industrial is, but non-residential, and that might help, well, I don't know. Maybe think about that, because there are areas that might be residential in some future development that,
Yes, sir.
that would fall into this area, but I think a definition probably would clarify it.
Yeah, and I could be wrong, but the way I'm reading this, it just says, if you're an industrial user and you're within this district, then you have to comply with their rules. So we're basically saying our rules don't supersede those rules, is the way I read that. Is that correct, or?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, I don't think it doesn't change anything about our industrial use. It just says, if you are one in that district, you have to follow those rules.
You know, we have a whole sections on general disposal requirements, discharge of substances, discharge of radioactive waste into the sewer system. I'm just looking at all this, and I just really want to narrow down, or make sure somewhere it's narrowed down and even referenced, if it is, reference back to this, that say, we're not talking about heavy industry, or we're talking about whatever a good definition would be, I don't know.
I think for the purposes of what we're tasked with doing here, I think we have to rely on the master plan, and Ordinance 13 is guiding us. It's conceivable there might be a healthcare facility and they may use radioactive material, in which case they would have to follow this. I don't know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think, I believe what the city manager had said, and,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of that's going to be driven by zoning and all of that on what's allowed and what's not allowed.
Do we need to reference somewhere that up front that there are other ordinances to refer to?
So that kind of goes with the comment I was going to make, and it's not in there, so there's no real page to put it, but several places we're referencing different existing documents, like we're adopting the new Bromfield standard and other things. And that's fine, but maybe we should have either up front in the definitions, or add in the back, just sort of a, for lack of a better term, a bibliography. Like, here's where you can find all those documents, because obviously they're subject to change, but if it was maybe an attachment, so that you could just change the attachment, without having to change the whole ordinance. But I would think if I was a potential developer, I'd want to know, okay, you're going to adopt these standards, and you're telling me to go here to find them. Or at least have one place where it's all consolidated, would be a recommendation, I guess.
There's plans to, quote unquote, codify all of our ordinances. Does that also deal with the issue of cross-referencing by virtue of how it's constructed? You put in a search term and it pops up. I'm asking that question because I know that's the plan, but I don't know what falls out of that.
So it's in the works to get codified, so it, obviously, once that happens, would be easier to reference or cite in this case, but right now, it's still in the works to get codified. I guess that's the closest I could say right now, to where we're at with it.
But, yeah, and it's not pressing to do that, it's just, it's a fair question, because when we were doing the water conservation ordinances, it touched on other things, and we made some references, but also did not. And I know that was on my mind too, is if you're gonna do this, where do you look? But if the codification process creates a search vehicle for this, that's.
I think this is a different issue in the sense that when you adopt an ordinance, the council's voted, it's there, and people know it's gonna change when the ordinance changes. But if we adopt by reference somebody else's rules or ordinances, they may change it, and folks may not be aware that it's changed. So we're saying we're using this ordinance, go here to verify, what it is.
Okay, so you're saying, like almost a closing section, refer to.
Yeah, just a list, here's the things we referred to that are adopted by reference. And,
Yes.
it may
yes,
or may
sir.
not
And-
be necessary, but
And say that's, I think there was one change made like that, but you do bring a great point. It should be adopting a specific year of the design standards, and so it's a specific one. So if they do change it, you're still controlling your own ordinance. Yeah.
Well, I think the question is if
Yep.
the New Braunfels ordinances are revised, somebody applying, put in a system, we would want them using the latest, right? And it would be incumbent on them to, I mean, we put a date in there, do they say, well, we complied with the one that was 10 years old? But the intent would be, if you're starting something, you ought to be working to the latest standards.
Commissioner, I guess my thought on that would be that you'd want control over, adopting that again to make sure that you agree with any of the changes that were made by New Braunfels.
Okay, that's a fair point. Thoughts, comments on that?
I think that's a better way to do it. I just wasn't sure if that was the intent or if we were just trying to pawn it off.
Yeah. Well, as an actionable item, let's make sure that the ones that we're referencing, whatever the rev number or date, for example, for New Braunfels or anything else is cited. And then also, if it's appropriate, a reference to ordinance 13, because it really does tie in closely with this.
Yes, sir, we can definitely do that.
Okay? Is that
And
okay?
while we're doing that, we got the New Braunfels ordinance and the Cibolo Creek in here in different places.
Right,
And are they the same, or are they different? or-
they're different.
And I believe that was the one we did catch and put a specific, adopting this revision of it, but we didn't catch the New Braunfels one.
Jumping ahead, I'm on to page 12, and this is about permit application. Do we have, does the city have a general permit form that is used for different things? That, this almost implies that there is a separate permit for a sewer system. That's fine if that's needed, but is it also appropriate that the existing permit application can be expanded to include this, just to eliminate another document? And I say this, I just did a fence permit. I don't know if that's the same permit that you use if you're gonna build a home. Steve and I may be sort of reflecting to you on that.
Not that I know, but we definitely want to create a different permit for
Okay.
the sewer system.
Okay.
It'd be
That's-
a whole different inspection criteria.
Okay. That's fine. I just wanted to throw that out there. And this is fine. Right at the end of that page, specifications, designs will be built according to the specifications required by the Texas Commission on, and then it ends. Environmental quality, is that, okay, I see, okay,
Yeah,
I
it-
see that now. And is that a dated requirement?
TCEQ on occasion will update the rules,
Okay.
no specific.
And I think the difference in that situation is you have to comply with those, as opposed to the New Braunfels, you have a choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's governed by state law. If you're gonna do
Yes,
something,
sir. Yes,
you're
sir.
incumbent to know what the latest TCEQ thing
Yep.
is. Okay, got it.
I do think, like TCEQ puts out a sizing worksheet, and as we talked about, like an amendment in here, I think that sizing worksheet should come in with the permit so that the inspector knows what size grease trap, and I use grease trap as an example because I think the most applicable business will probably be a restaurant that taps into the sewer system because they're gonna have impermeable with a parking lot and a building, and it's gonna fit inside 13. And then when they come in for to tap into the line, they're gonna need a grease trap. And so TCEQ puts out a suggested worksheet, but I think we ought to put it as an amendment in there so that we know what size grease trap that they put in there before we undersize one and clog up the system. Like, that's my main concern is grease in these systems.
Yes,
It's-
sir.
That is our biggest enemy in these. And so I think the grease trap or interceptor, whichever one you want to call it, we really need to get kind of specific about how we put it in, the permit, the size, what we're going to accept. That's what I think the specifications in there where it talks about New Braunfels utility, and then that's the reference, and then it references TCEQs on there, which has a suggestion for the size of interceptor. I think we ought to adopt that into an appendix or a attachment.
Thoughts, comments on that, Stephen? I'm particularly thinking of how you view permits and what's attached and stuff. I mean, that's one item. Is there other things that in your collective knowledge on wastewater that should be just submitted as standard fare with a permit? I mean, a grease trap, you're right, is extremely important, and a lot of this is gonna be entertainment, food service coming into these areas.
I do think it brings into the idea of O&M on that side of the operations and maintenance as, you know, for backflow devices in Garden Ridge, we're supposed to have them inspected once a year. Is that right? Yeah. I think we need to inspect grease traps once a year, which puts a burden on the Stevens folks to go out there and look at these grease traps, see if they're working properly, so that we don't fill these sewer lines full of grease.
You get it pumped on a regular schedule, that's what is required. So maybe, I don't know if you can get the department to do the inspection, like you do on the backflow prevention devices, but there's probably a company that would do that, and maybe we should incorporate something like that.
Well, that was the question I was gonna ask, and you're right. If it's a system that's gonna have to be maintained, is this the place to put it, or are there gonna be other operating documents like the specification document that would cover that? Or do you have some other preference from the city's standpoint? I mean, I agree, it needs to be someplace. If we're gonna have sewer systems, connections, and a trap, for example, maybe there's other things that require routine checks. I don't know if grinders need to be inspected periodically to make sure the blades are still there. And I'm speaking without experience. I've only had septic systems. I don't know.
Yeah, Commissioner, I guess I would also like to, I am not 100% familiar with the New Braunfels, design standards. I haven't read through them lately, so I need to see what's in there. And, to your point, some sort of sizing worksheet is fairly common with, municipalities. I think, most of them have something. And New Braunfels may even have something like that in theirs, but I can definitely look into it.
Once these systems are in operation, though, it becomes the responsibility of Garden Ridge and residents to keep it, like the flow checks, so this would have to be routinized. Do you want something like that in this, or is there some other document?
And you have a sprinkler system. I mean, if you have a sprinkler system and you have an on-site sewage facility, you automatically have to have an RP, which is required to be tested annually
Okay.
for that one. And we also have that in the ordinance 54.
Okay, so it is in 54 then, okay.
And then, but yeah, for the testing of the grease trap inspection, yeah, I'm all for it. The more protections we have, the better.
Well, I think it's, to wrap this discussion up, let's add a section that refers to that, and then anything else as appropriate to be inspected periodically. I mean, we're
Okay.
thinking grease traps, but maybe other things
Yes, sir.
that require an annual check, and that way it's put in and it's put into a routine that won't be
We
forgotten.
can have them put them hire their own plumber and have them check off on something instead of us checking it. That way their plumbing license on the line when it comes to that.
Other comments? I recall from draft 1 and 2, and now this is on to 3, whether we're comfortable with the penalty statements, and made some questions about legal reviews. Is that something that needs to go through a final check? I mean, I don't have any particular comments. This seems very thorough, but are these the amounts that are appropriate? And is legal comfortable with this penalty statement? Each ordinance has a little bit different wording in the area of penalties, and I just want to make sure this one is,
Yeah, ultimately, this is gonna have to go back to legal. I mean,
Okay.
it was, before this was presented to y'all, it was reviewed by legal,
okay.
so it's gonna have to go back.
Just because I was down the grease trap or interceptor road, TCEQ does have a section, and I'll give it to you, Jason, but
Okay.
it's basically the penalties, which they would suggest an entity impose for grease trap violations, and I'll give them to you too.
Okay.
And last, and it may be specified in these other documents that are referenced, but we use BOD and COD and CBOD. Actually, that's Celsius BOD. But anyway, we use that several times in various formulas, and they're not defined in there. And again, I'm sure they're standard terms, but for
Yeah.
folks reading
Yes,
it,
sir,
they
we
should
can-
probably know.
Yeah. And that was something that we discussed as well, some sort of definition section.
Okay.
Yeah. It's-
He knows all about that, so, okay. But in that same area where that formula is on page 11, and maybe I just didn't understand this, the discharger shall pay monthly in accordance with the provisions of Article 1 of this chapter. I just couldn't find out what article, what reference that was being made, and is this sufficiently clear? It's right above 4.11 is parent G of the prior section.
Yeah, I had that
Yeah.
same question, and I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, this
may have
section
been
is a big- is a-
Compilation from somewhere else.
Yeah,
It
it's
could
a
have-
major
could have been a
lift.
carryover
Either
from
this
something
section
else.
or subsection, or whatever we want
Okay.
to say it, so.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
we're talking about the definitions of COD, BOD, suspended solid, so on, can there be just a little sub-note about it has to be performed by a licensed facility that's qualified to do that?
Yes, sir.
I can do it in my backyard, in my kitchen, but
Okay. Any other comment? I really appreciate the thoroughness of everybody's review. These are all good, and I know it's given you a lot of work, but I think this comes when you're putting together, you know, ordinances that make sense in another context and trying to marry it to the Garden Ridge. And so thank you
Yes, sir.
for taking
Yep,
all of that
I definitely
on.
agree, and I want to make sure it's done correctly. It's an important document.
Okay. I do have one question. Does this have to go to public review by the Water Commission before it goes to the City Council? Public hearing?
I will check on that.
Okay,
I believe it does, but we did that for the water, I believe, didn't we?
we did.
Yeah, so, I'll clarify that one,
Okay.
so.
In that context, we don't meet next month due to elections, so we've got some time to
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, if,
set all of that.
it could be done in May,
Okay.
and bring this back to y'all to cleaned up and, a little bit more.
Okay.
Sounds good.
And also gives us an opportunity to make sure that there's no obvious wording conflicts with ordinance 13, based on some of the comments we received tonight. We can take a look at that. If there are no other comments, we'll move on to item 5, future agenda items. Like I said, our next meeting will be in May due to conflicts with elections in April. I'd like to put this item back on the agenda. Is there any other items that the city would like to add? We're starting to get into the budgeting time.
Yeah, no, I just can't remember the item that we had in January that we put off for a while. It had to do with the,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry, Chairman, I can't remember. What was that, Michelle? It was an item, we wanted to tackle this first. We wanted to get the CIP done, tackle this, and then there was a third item that we put
Yeah.
off.
Like I said earlier, I
And
don't.
and it was gonna take some time because it was reviewing other cities' rates related, Stephen, you remember? Operational. So,
Okay.
yeah, maybe it was a November, December timeframe, but,
Well, I have license to work with you to take.
Yes, sir.
To research that and add it to the agenda,
Yeah.
and plenty of time to take a look at it. It's something that we did briefly touch on in a prior meeting.
and, you know, again, just so y'all know, from a water commission standpoint, and, you know, I know that you come back and relay what happens at council, but there's things in the works like, you know, we just changed the building code and, working to bring next month an ordinance has all of our fees related to residential, commercial in there. And then, P and Z's working on the subdivision ordinance right now that we hope to bring to city council in the next month or two. So there's a lot of moving parts to this and looking at various areas. Not only when we introduce a new wastewater ordinance like this, there's other areas that we've been, at least myself and staff have been tackling since I got here to make sure that we've updated those things, so. But yes, we're gonna come up on budget, and then we're gonna start looking at, you know, how and I think I told you all that we would bring back the budget to y'all to be looked at, start looking at water rates early on, so that we have a good handle on those once we adopt the budget in September. Or late August, sorry.
Commission, any other future agenda items you'd like to add? Okay. Second citizens' comment period. Do we have any speakers? Okay, thank you. That concludes all the items on the agenda. The meeting's adjourned at 7:14.